Hello and welcome back to the Rowan Consulting Shedtalks, the series of discussions which are designed to inform and equip business owners and leaders with helpful advice on managing and engaging teams. As you know, this series actually supports both our Grow and our Emerging Leaders programme. So let's dive in. We already have had a few questions, I think, sort of from listeners, previous listeners. As usual, we will aim to answer those sort of as we go through, but if we don't, then don't panic. We will get to your question and we'll be sure to message you back after the session. So today's subject, the ins and outs of restructuring. We love a bit of restructuring. Let me just introduce the guest speakers for today. We have, depending on which side you're watching, on my right, we have Annie Hill, Legal Exec for the Employment and Commercial team at Moses Druitt. Welcome back to the shed.
Thank you for having me.
And then on the left hand, I don't know if I got that right, on the left hand side of the screen, we have my partner in crime, Rowena Smith, client partner for here at Rowan Consulting. Hello, welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So today we're talking about restructuring, and for the context of the listeners, or for the purpose of the listeners, this will specifically be around, obviously because we're organisational coaches, this is around restructuring the people aspect of your business rather than restructuring in terms of finance, etc. So when we talk about the restructuring in terms of from a people perspective, what we're actually talking about is sizing up and sizing down, I think would be sort of a fair assumption. So we might be talking about, on the less positive side, we might be talking about things like redundancy. On a more positive side for restructuring, which is interestingly what most people I think forget, is that actually restructuring sizing up is equally as important, and obviously moving the individuals internally sideways and up, etc. in terms of promotion is probably the one that doesn't get talked about enough. I think when we think restructuring, it's easy to think restructuring equals redundancy. And actually what we're talking about both sides, the positive and the negative. So bearing in mind, first and foremost, we are organisational coaches and business owners. Interesting subject, which is very close to mine and Rowena's heart. And I think probably, interestingly, we have seen an increase by about 80% in the work that we're doing with our clients in the business at the moment. So it's obviously something which is at that point that people are thinking about and is on the radar at the moment. Possibly, I think, it'd be interesting to hear your side, guys. Probably, I think, in fact, we're coming out of the pandemic and people are resettling and needing to move their business in different ways. So the conversation will be around what we need to consider, what we need to think about if we are looking to restructure teams or individuals within the business. So as usual, I'll do the OD bit, and Annie can do the legal bit, and Ro can do the HR bit, which sounds nice and tidy. So Annie, welcome back to the shed. So just very quickly then, what are you actually seeing sort of from your side in terms of restructuring at the moment?
I think the most prominent thing we're seeing at the moment is that people are just going straight in, maybe a little bit too quickly. Whether it's a restructure for positive reasons because of really, really quick growth, which we're seeing more of, which is great, or whether it's a restructure because you're needing to cost save in different areas of the business. I think people aren't taking that step back and actually cementing what they're wanting to achieve and the rationale behind the restructure. They're just going, something needs to change, this needs to happen. And then, as we'll all go through during the course of the talk, the implications on that, I think, are greater than had these conversations, had people spent time on these conversations to start with. The bigger picture definitely just needs to be taken into consideration.
I think we'd agree with that, Ro, wouldn't we?
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
So from our side, yeah, the thought of restructuring for most sort of business owners and managers, actually from sort of larger organisations, the thought of restructuring feels like a mammoth task. And when everybody, I think, is really busy doing the day job, I think the thought of having to do that and having to sort of restructure, I think is too much of a big thing to think about. So I think, like you said, Annie, what happens is then it hits a crunch point or a tipping point, and then something happens, and it happens so quickly that it becomes slightly sort of a little bit like herding fish. It becomes unmanageable. So I think we'd agree that we probably see the same thing. And I think then what happens is that rush in causes those, those problems to happen. So from a legal perspective then, give us some sort of tips and hints in terms of what we think, what should we be considering sort of before, so in order to prepare, and then a little bit about sort of during and after.
Yeah, so the before point links back to what I was saying a second ago about the rationale. Ultimately, you want to be able to confidently answer the question, what does the business need? I think if you can answer that and you can portray that message throughout the restructure, whatever that looks like, that will hopefully lead to less fallout and less problems as you're going through it. A good place to start is looking at what you've got. Whether that's looking at job descriptions if you've got them, or just actually sitting down and looking into teams and specifics of what people are doing, who they're reporting to, and whether that's working. And then once you've got that conversation, you can then link that to your rationale, and that's going to highlight the gaps that you need to fill. I think is a short version of what it looks like to restructure. I think that's going to be a very good place to start, because those gaps are where the conversations and the work and things is going to come from, because it might not even be that a restructure overall is needed. It might identify that there's underperformance, which is why things aren't going necessarily as well. So rather than it being a complete overhaul of a team, it might be that you have to look into capability procedures, and that will solve problems that you're facing, rather than a big scary overall restructure. So I think really dumbing down, looking into what you've got comparing it to what you want is a great place to start.
Yeah, I think we'd agree. I think there's a from an organizational design perspective, there is something about, we always refer to it as throw it forward. So throw it forward by at least 18 months, 2 years.
Yeah.
In order that you're doing it, so you don't have to go back and recheck it. You don't have to go back and do the same exercise in a year's time. Throw it forward enough that you can see what that looks like. Yeah. And then it is about cementing that structure. What do we need the structure of this business to look like? Yeah. And I think, it's which is sometimes, I think, the easiest thing, but the thing that's missed the most, I would say.
Yeah, because it's quite a daunting process, isn't it? Especially if you're going through a lot of growth, or your unexpected change of events means you're not growing. It's a lot to take in, and I guess if it's your business, there's a lot of emotion behind it as well. If you've started it from the ground up, you never want to be in a situation where you're making people redundant. It's not nice. But yeah, definitely have these meetings or thoughts with yourself, or make a business plan, things like that. It's a really good place to start. In terms of during, once you've got the foundation of what you need to do, the next bit is going to be the impact on job roles that you've already got. So whether that is varying job titles, let's start with the positive, promotions, taking on more responsibility if employees are happy to, really progressing your own is great to see in a business, and can also save on recruiting somebody in. If you've got somebody there that's more than capable and is maybe even doing a lot of that already, then they can probably naturally step into a role that's needed. It may be that the opposite happens and redundancies are needed. Things to think about is the number of redundancies. If you're going to need to head into consultation or anything like that, highlighting any risk in terms of protected characteristics. Maternity and redundancy link very, very strong. I know we'll cover that towards the end, so I won't go into that too much now, but highlight, and if there is risk in terms of an employee maybe not wanting to take on a new role and then feeling like they're being managed out, if there's anything like that, any sort of negative points coming from these, and there's risk that is identified, considering the options there and potentially involving advisors at that stage, I think it would be the most sensible thing to do. It's not fun to get lawyers involved, and it does get a bit more expensive than you'd want, but if there is any risk flagged, I think the best thing to do is get some help. But
definitely,
yeah. And then after, which is something I think people don't think about, you think, right, that's it, redundancy's done, I'm comfortable, or promotions and job changes have happened. But I think there's two really important things. One is keeping an eye on the people that nothing's happened to, because any change in a business, even if it's not relating to your role, is going to rock the ship a bit. People sense it. If there's things going on and there's the, oh, am I next? Or just keep checking in with people, I think is really important, even afterwards, those that were affected and those that weren't, because they probably still have questions, because those conversations, as much as you portray a message, those conversations aren't going to necessarily be happening directly with the people who aren't affected, and they might still have a few concerns that will fester, I think, if they don't get to talk about them. And then if you do go through a redundancy process and suitable alternative roles are offered and accepted, there is a 4-week trial period for those. So keep an eye on those that have gone into alternative roles. Keep an eye on those, whether they're working. If they are, fantastic, and if they're not, then there are implications in terms of, if they then don't continue in that role, there are implications on, they are then redundant, based back to the day that they would have been made redundant. So there's a couple of points there to consider as well. But I think that's a good thing to just keep an eye on. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but.
And Rowan, I was smiling throughout that only because we've been through a few of these at the moment, and I think it is one of those things that keeps coming back up again, is that, you know, and something which is so often missed is there's a lot of focus on you know, when we're downsizing. So, you know, if from a sort of sizing perspective, if you're sizing down, the focus tends to be on those that are, you know, that are going, and you know, which is absolutely right, you know, that's 100% right, but equally there are probably a much larger proportion that are staying. And you know, be communicating with that, and I know it's something Rose is going to talk about in a minute, but communicating with that those group of individuals is so often missed. Often missed. And like you said, you know, as soon as you mention, you know, downsizing or whatever else, everybody immediately goes into, what about, you know, what about me, quite rightly. So, you know, being able to manage those expectations is critical. It's, you know, and it's one thing that is so easy that, you know, when we're talking to clients, they'll go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And you go, I know, but then that's what, it's like you said,
that's why
experts.
We're good at what we do. But no, I do think that is really important, just from a morale point of view as well. It's one of those things. Once that seed is planted in someone's brain, it's better to just have that conversation, and it much less likely to go any further if you can just talk. Couldn't recommend it enough.
The other interesting thing you picked up on was just sort of scribbling notes as you were talking. There's a really valid point in there about the roles and the job descriptions that, again, I think is often missed. So on a positive, when we're upsizing and there is, you know, either swift change or growth or whatever else, I think that the roles part is again the bit that's missed. It's about, okay, well, this is what the company needs to be able to achieve. And from a roles perspective is the gap analysis that people don't think about doing. Because if we've thrown it forward and we've gone, okay, this is what 2 years ahead needs to look like, and actually then we say, okay, that structure needs to include these type of roles, there is a massively positive message in there to be able to say, yes, we're changing. And people, you know, because people sometimes, that's where the fear comes in. It's like change means, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to, you know, this is an annual thing, or we're going to have to do it again. But if we know what the structure looks like in terms of that plan, if we know what over there looks like, then we know what the roles need to look like. The massively positive message is, look what is available to you. And again, is so often missed. And, you know, we've got a client that, you know, we've been working with for about 18 months, 2 years now, right? And getting them, you know, the one thing they've said to us is, there's almost like a light bulb moment, isn't there, where they just go, oh, the structure that you told us to do, that's where it comes in really helpful.
Makes
and you go,
sense.
Yeah, there we go. The penny has dropped. But it is, and like I said, you know, in a time when recruitment is really, really hard, when employee engagement is really hard, use those positive messages to be able to say, you know, this is where we're going, this is where you are, and this is the opportunity for growth and development that you have. And that gap analysis is easy. It's their training plan, isn't it? So
and that's quite motivating as well.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
Definitely. And I think the other thing is clarity is key, isn't it? It's like, don't try and hide anything anywhere.
No, it's because eventually it comes out, and then, or just, yeah, be as transparent as you can be.
Yeah. Okay, so some good stuff there. The plan, obviously take time to prepare and plan. Involve the experts. Yeah, I think, you know, again, interestingly, so here's a question. Do you find that sometimes they are reluctant to involve, you know, people like yourself from a legal aspect, or us from an organizational design, because there's a fear attached to that?
A fear,
Or there's a judgment attached to it.
Oh, okay.
If I ask them,
I
I'm
thought you said
admitting
fee.
something.
A little bit, because it all gets a bit serious when the lawyers get involved, and I can imagine as a business owner you would love it if you could just take care of these things by yourself, because it's things that it's all available to people. The information on how to do these things is available, but ultimately it's better. We know why we need to do it. We know the reason behind it. And we can highlight that risk to you. And I think that the risk bit is the real value that comes, because anybody can conduct the process, but without doing it as our job, we're a lot more in tune with the risk that comes from it, and that's probably where it's going to be a lot more worth it for you. So yeah, does that help answer your question a bit?
Yeah, sorry, I threw that one in then, didn't I? That was
Yeah. But I think as well, from a time perspective, because these things take they are a huge drain on your time, and as a small business owner, you don't have loads of time. So for someone to conduct that with you, you know, not saying the expert comes in and does it for you, but advises and consults you on doing it, is it makes sense.
And that's definitely something we're finding more from startups. We're getting a lot of new inquiries from startup companies, and have people on the phone and they're going, Annie, I've got this business that's sort of happened by itself because I had an idea during COVID and I've developed it and I've got a full-time job, but now everybody's saying, oh, we want to use this product, you should run this as a business, but my skill is at thinking of this and doing it. My skill isn't running the business. And that's something that we like to help people with, because I'm sure you guys are exactly the same. Like, taking that pressure off of them then leaves them with the time to run the business and do what they're good at, and then we can help them by doing what we're good at. So
yeah, and again, like I said, that goes back to that sort of like fear thing, isn't it? Is that, you know, I think especially with redundancy, it's where we find it is that, oh, we didn't ask you the question because we didn't want to admit to you that we were going to have to reshape the business. And it's like, reshaping business is naturally organic.
Yeah.
You know, my business when I started, you know, 12 however many years ago it was, a long time ago, double digits, my business when I started and what it's like now, and Ro will testify to this. I mean, you've been with me for years, but that journey that we've been on is always changing. You know, it reaches a point that just, and again, I think that's the thing is you just go, it's fine, we'll hold your hand, we know what we're doing. You know, we do this as a job. And, you know, and therefore, you know, just ask, no question, you know, no question is ever too stupid, really, is it? It's like, we probably heard them all before anyway.
Okay.
So yes, so going back then, so plan and prepare, involve the experts, do your risk assessment, you know, both sides of it, positive and negative, do the risk assessment, and do your people check. It's one thing that's most often forgotten. Okay, so Ro, we've had some questions in. If I come over to you for the questions that have been submitted.
Yes. So, okay. So the first one is for you, Annie. Someone that is carrying out some redundancies as part of a restructure. So they've got someone in their team who is pregnant. They're a small business. They're in this person is in a standalone role. What do they need to consider?
So first off, pregnancy cannot be any factor in redundancy situation at all. That leads to an automatically unfair dismissal and is potentially discriminatory as well. So that ideally shouldn't be in the equation really as much as possible. I think one thing to think about is that they are entitled to be offered any suitable vacancy and priority of other employees that are up for redundancy on not less than favourable terms. So have a look what other roles. I assume by standalone they mean that it's not like there's 10 of them and 5 need to be made redundant. that sort of thing. But just look at what is available and offer as best you can. Another thing to think of is that it may be look into whether or not you will need to cover the rest of their statutory maternity pay if there's an overlap when they go off, because some businesses will need to, depending on the size of the business, they might be able to claim that back.
Right.
So that's one thing to explore as well. So those are 3 points I think to.
So actually what we're
about.
saying, Annie, is you can make people redundant if they're pregnant. I think that's the other thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, you know, the you know, you can make people redundant if they're pregnant, but you just have to make sure that it's, you know, there's a process that is followed, and that the due diligence has taken place in terms of other suitable roles, because clearly we're not going to take somebody who is in a standalone role who is pregnant from doing a receptionist role to being a zoologist. Extreme, but you get for purposes of the exercise. That's not going to happen. But what will happen is to make sure that actually if there is a termination on grounds of redundancy, that it's handled correctly. Is that that's what we're saying?
I'd say there's more. There's obviously hurdles with any redundancy, but there's more hurdles that you need to demonstrate. It's not to say it's impossible, but you just need to have considered these things and demonstrated that you have considered these things, and that as much as possible there's no argument that the maternity or the pregnancy was a reason for the dismissal. If the role doesn't exist, then the role doesn't exist, and that does happen as well. But there's just the added protection for expecting mums and mothers on maternity leave when it comes to potential redundancies of their role.
Okay. Thank you, Annie. Okay, this next one is from actually one of our clients. So if an employee accepts an alternative role as part of the redundancy process, can they still appeal the decision for redundancy in the role that they have just been made redundant from? If that makes sense, because I know it's a bit slightly complicated, isn't it?
Those are the types of questions we love, isn't
I know.
it?
So this role's been made redundant.
Yeah.
They've accepted an alternative role, but can they still appeal the fact they were made redundant from this role?
So my thoughts on this one were that if they accept the alternative role, they've not been made redundant. So there's almost nothing to appeal, is my thoughts. It gets a bit complicated with the trial period if that doesn't work, and then it doesn't work, or they're dismissed because of misconduct during that trial period. But that's quite a tricky one to be honest. But my first thought is that they haven't been made redundant. They're on the same terms or slightly different bookended terms, and they have a role.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what there would be to appeal. I can see the question, but that's my thoughts anyway. I'm not sure how helpful that is, but
logically it sort of feels like why would you appealing a redundancy situation previously if you've already accepted a new role? You almost need to do it before you accept the new role, I think. But like you said, there are nuances attached to that.
And I guess the point is the bigger picture is you've got the role. So there's not much of a loss, I guess, because it's you'd expect that it would be on similar, if not more favourable terms.
Yes.
But that's
so there's not a lot to appeal.
Ro, there's one for you. Always an interesting question. Ro, one for you. So it says, do you have any advice on how to approach the initial conversation with employees around restructuring?
Oh, yes, loads of advice. Okay, so when we work with clients, we would always encourage them to focus on the human side of the business. So the emotion that's attached to and whether that is growing or downsizing, just understanding that humans have emotions, and that's kind of where it can get quite complex. The process itself to follow, for example, a redundancy situation, is fairly simple. Also, sort of what Annie said with regards to having a good, solid rationale, understanding the reason why you are doing it, and being able to portray that to your employees. I think part of it is being open and honest, making yourself available to answer any questions that your employees may have. So, letting them know that you're there. Don't kind of drop a bomb and tell them, the company needs to downsize, and then you go off on annual leave for 2 weeks, because that's just not helpful to anybody. And it doesn't give, it does happen. It does happen. It just
We're all
doesn't
now
give.
going, yeah, we've had that incident before as well.
Yeah.
But how does that look to employees? It's not great, is it? So having that door always open for certainly for a set period of time. We worked with a client recently who was carrying out a restructure, and they did it brilliantly from start to finish. Due to the size of the organization and everyone being in different kind of geographical locations, they created an employee forum, so that all the employees could channel any questions via the forum, and they felt like they had a voice. So that's definitely something to consider. Something else that we advise our clients is to provide employees with a sort of an FAQ sheet, if you like, especially where redundancies are concerned, because I think that initial meeting of saying, unfortunately we are going to have to downsize, the initial, the instant reaction is panic from your employees. And kind of understanding that emotional journey they're going to go on. So give them that FAQ sheet to take away, read those questions, come back and talk to me tomorrow, the next day, whatever. And I think finally, from our point of view, and again, Annie's touched on this, is just make sure that you front load these projects, get your admin, get your template documents all ready to go, to just basically save yourself time and really unnecessary stress further down the line.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got anything else, either of you have got anything else to add to that, really.
I think the FAQ thing's a very good idea, because it ensures consistency as well. I think depending on the size of the business and the number of managers delivering messages and their experience in doing so, having something like that, I think, is going to be really good and really beneficial for employees that are in different teams, maybe, that have been given the same message, to definitely hone them in on why it's happening in a much more consistent way.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think, you had a rolling FAQs on one of yours, Ro, didn't you? That literally it would start with the initial set of questions, and then it was a rolling set, so it would just get added to, so people could almost see how things were progressing. And it, you ask one question, don't you, and there's always a part 2 attached to it. So it was really good to have that rolling, that rolling side. That's really good, Ro, actually. So what we're saying is appreciate the human aspect, appreciate the human side. People have feelings and emotions. Consider your rationale, which is what Annie was advising. Open and honest, to have an open door policy. Don't bugger off on holiday. Forum and the employee communication, keeping the communication channels going. And I know who you're talking about there, and they did do it brilliantly well. Really good. It's one of those ones where if we could hold them up, we just go, this is how you do it, guys. This is this is how you do it. This is how you communicate. And the fact that they were geographically dispersed, hands up to the hands off, hats off. Hands up or hats off to them. FAQs, keep a rolling keep a rolling set of FAQs, and front load your projects. Thanks, Ray. That's brilliant. Really good piece of advice.
Right, final question is for you, Karen. This is an area you love. So the question is, we want to grow the team, and as such, we need to develop our manager. Where do we begin with this?
Okay, I could talk about this for hours. So
so can you just limit this to a few minutes, please, Karen?
So I think again, from a concise perspective, a quick answer. In terms of sort of developing managers, it is about the organizational growth of the business. Again, track it forward 2 years. Don't repeat yourself. Don't have to do the subject, or don't have to do this long and very time consuming job every year. Throw it forward 3 to 5 years. On our Grow program, we always talk to clients, thinking 3 to 5 years ahead. Once you have that, define, you know, what it is that you're actually looking for in terms of the structure. And then in terms of the developing the managers, that forms our emerging leaders program. If we're bringing them through and we're saying to them, this is what future state looks like, this is your role, this is what we expect from you. We use 4 core markers or 4 core pillars when we're working with clients for the Grow program. So they will have all 4, that each individual will have those 4 core pillars, which is financial, operational excellence, customer and people. So when we're growing managers, we're growing them against the needs of the business. And again, it is that engagement, that employee engagement perspective, that actually what we're teaching them is that, or what we're coaching them in, is helping them to understand what growth looks like, what change looks like, so they can communicate that message back down the line.
Their teams, yeah.
Because the biggest thing we find is that owners, business owners, think they have to do everything. And it's a huge misconception. The amount of times I say to managers or business owners, you don't have to do everything. Your job is to set it up, tell them what the destination, the direction looks like. Where are we going? What are we doing? What does it look like? And then your role is to step back and to let your managers take over. And then your managers communicate that back down. So clarity, communication, and be clear on what that overall destination looks like. We love a bit of destination direction roadmap stuff.
Yeah.
About it for hours.
We talk about buses a lot, don't we?
We talk about buses.
It's
Get
a
on
bus
the
or a
bus.
ship, isn't it? Yeah.
Where's the bus going?
Yeah. Yeah. Where is the bus going?
Yeah.
We'll give you the
Who's on it?
Australian analogy at one point. So yeah, I think take it, throw it forward, see what the future looks like, and massively use it to increase your employee engagement.
Yeah.
Because it's the easiest thing that you can do right now. I mean, everyone's going, pay them more money, do them this, do this. No, the easiest way to do it is to go for the Whipham effect. What's in it for me, and how will I be able to do that? So that wasn't bad. That was like just over 2 minutes.
Very good.
I did it in 2 minutes. Any more questions? I think that's
no, I think that's it for questions.
okay. We're close to time anyway. Look at this.
Yep.
It's almost like we've done it before. Okay, so yes, really interesting discussion. Before we close off, again, the types of things that I think are the common themes that I've picked up, and I'll come to you guys for something that you've picked up in a minute. But the common things that I'm hearing is around future-proof it, clarity, communication. I think that's what from what you guys have been talking about, I think that feels like what it is, you know, the takeaways sort of from this. Have you got anything that you think from a takeaway perspective? One thing you would take away?
Consistency. Which is
Consistency.
what I thought of from Rose, very helpful tips.
Yeah, and I think just clarity really, and just that human, just remember there's humans involved. So
Yeah.
That's where it's complicated.
It's almost like we went through all the C's then, doesn't it? It was like we were like C, and then you've just gone H, human. 3 C's, 1 H. That could be a new model we could use, isn't it? Right, thank you very much both. I really appreciate that. For those of you who are interested in progressing the conversation as normal, then obviously please feel free to contact us via our usual channels. We have the old-fashioned telephone if anybody wants to pick it up and have a conversation with either us at Rowan Consulting or Annie over at Moses Druitt. Email and our website. There's lots of resources. In fact, there's lots of resources on our website, which is rowanhr.com, and then go to resources. Annie, I think you've got links that you have got from Moses Druitt as well. So yeah, check out the Moses. Can you just give me the Moses email address, so that website address, so that everybody knows where they can go?
www.mosesdruitt.com.
Excellent. Okay,
like
we're really simple, aren't we?
Yeah, read out the term.
On the spot. And then obviously we've got our social media channels, which for us is Rowan Consulting on LinkedIn and RowanHR_ on Facebook and Instagram. Check out our links on there. We'll put these posts on here as well. For those of you listening on playback, the links to the show notes will also be on the website to be able to download after the event. Thank you very much for joining me. This has been a Shed Talk by Rowan Consulting, HR and organisational design specialists working with business owners and leaders to structure the business for future growth and change. If you've enjoyed this Shed Talk, please feel free to share it amongst your colleagues and your contacts, and subscribe to our videos. Just click on the subscribe link where you're watching this video. Thank you very much again. Really nice to see you both. Stay well, and we will see you very, very soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.